Right, in this second one, for one thing, I apologise for very often there was a sort of breathy thud on the mic as I was talking, but that's mainly down to the fact that of the mic being so close to my face. There's not much I can do about that. It's the only mic that I've got available, and I'm afraid you'll just have to cope, really, if you're watching the second one, which seems unlikely. But the second one should be a great deal, well, I say a great deal shorter, but it's actually going to be about even. I think I've answered about 8 questions in the last one, and there's 8 questions in this one. I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. Couple more anonymous ones left. Which Harry Potter book is my favourite and why? I would have to say, thinking on it, that it was probably... I'd have to say Order of the Phoenix, because it had that wonderful mix of action, mystery, and sort of taking part in school. Because that was always one of the big draws of the Harry Potter world, is sort of how J.K. Rowling made the everyday life of going to a boarding school into this magical, mysterious adventure, because you know all the magical lessons and that. So yeah, even though Sirius died, and I cried like a small child when Sirius died, even though that happened, I think Umbridge makes that book. I think J.K. Rowling really pulled it off in making such a loathsome character that we all wanted to see her get a comeuppance. Another anonymous question: what is your favourite book ever and why? Which actually also ties into a question that Dead asked me, my American blog colleague, because my favourite books are just generally the work of Bret Easton Ellis, and just because he writes so immaculately on the problems in society at certain times. Less Than Zero dealt with the sort of affluence of young people in the 80s, and then you had, in fact, you had the trilogy, you had the 3 really, not a trilogy, they weren't connected as such, but you had Less Than Zero, you had Rules of Attraction, and then American Psycho, and it sort of dealt with the 3 stages of sort of teenagehood, university / college, and then careers, and it dealt with how the 80s world of consumption sort of affected them at each level. So you had the disassociated people in the first 2 who, you know, didn't really care for anything and were just sort of partying their lives away, and then in the final one you have Patrick Bateman, who is, you know, just the epitome of someone who was, you know, promised everything by society and has it, and then discovers that it's not enough, and, you know, just satisfy that he has to go about with doing all the murderings and that. And in Dead asked me what my favourite Bret Easton Ellis character was, and I have to say that it's hard because they're not designed to be. Ellis doesn't design his characters to be particularly empathetic. We're not supposed to read about Victor Powell and Patrick Bateman and Sean Bateman and think, oh, these are stand-up guys. We're not really meant to be able to relate to them because they're monsters in different ways. Whether it be, you know, selfishness, or Bateman was just a monster. So I think I'd have to roll with Clay in Less Than Zero, because in Less Than Zero he's presented as someone who's disillusioned. He sees the flaws in the world that he's in, whereas in the other books, the main characters of other books don't really see it for what it is. So I think Clay's probably my favourite in that book. In the sequel, in Imperial Bedrooms, it becomes apparent that he's transformed into the same as everyone else, but that's apparently because Bret Easton Ellis wanted, the whole reason he wrote the sequel was he wanted to rectify the Clay of Less Than Zero. He felt that he'd made Clay too sympathetic. So there's that. And then we have a trio of questions from It's Only Nyla, or Neela, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Have you ever dyed your hair before? If no, would you like to, and what colour? And if yes, did you like the end result? I've dyed my hair a few times. When I was sort of 15, I hit that sort of teenage phase of, right, I'm surrounded by these people who all like pop music. I don't like pop music, what can I do to be different? So I dyed my hair black, bought a big leather trench coat, well, you know, technically I got it for Christmas, but, and then, you know, went around listening to System of a Down, and I was like, anarchy, I hate the government, oh, this is rubbish, oh, aren't drugs great, you know, frankly I was talking out my arse. I didn't know anything about anarchy, I didn't know anything about drugs or drink, I didn't touch drink until I was 16, which was quite late for my friendship group. A lot of people I know started at sort of 14, 15. So yeah, I've dyed my hair black once before, and then more recently, sort of around 2008, the summer of 2008, I dyed it red, just because I fancied seeing what it looked like and I enjoyed it, so I did it again. But the problem with dyeing it red is that there are certain clothes that you can't wear, there are certain colours of clothes that you can't get away with wearing. But I would contemplate dyeing it red again, so we will see. The last film I watched, and my opinion on it, and my favourite film to watch on a lazy day. The last film I watched was that I watched all the way through, I believe, was Glory. I can't remember the last one I saw in the cinema because it's been a very long time. The last one I saw in the cinema may have been X-Men First Class. But the last film that I watched all the way through was Glory, which is a film about the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, which was an infantry regiment in the American Civil War, made entirely up of emancipated slaves that had been freed by Lincoln, and it's got Morgan Freeman, Denzel Washington, the guy who plays Ferris Bueller, and Andre Braugher, who's in Homicide: Life on the Street. And it's really fascinating because obviously they've been slaves without freedom, and then they've been freed and become free people, but chosen to go into a life of what is essentially servitude by going into the army, and how that plays out and the story surrounding it is really quite touching. And my favourite film to watch on a lazy day is probably it's always being shown on Film 4, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is an action film showing Sean Connery, for one, about a host of superpowered people in the 19th century, the Victorian era, foiling 18th century fantasy terrorism. And it's quite a bad film in many ways. It's not particularly, well thought out. Not a lot of emphasis is given to dialogue, things like that. But it has its moments. I love Mr. Hyde in it, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And it's really easy. You can go away. I could leave the room for 30 minutes and come back and still know what was going on. It's really easy to pick up on what's happening and who people are and things like that. So yeah. And the comic that it's based on, the original comic, is fantastic. Mr. Hyde, they portray Mr. Hyde far more evilly there, and they can because it's a comic, whereas I think in a film they wanted to make it PG enough so that they could get, the cash. So Mr. Hyde is less the epitome of evil that he is in the comics, and more the just a very large, muscular, angry man. And finally, have I been to see Dan Lasac versus Scroobius Pip live before? And I haven't, and I would love to. But what I'm more excited about at the minute is Scroobius Pip is releasing a solo album called Distraction Pieces. And I've already posted one of his tracks, Introduction, which is the first song, on my blog. And Scroobius Pip is a really exciting rapper, because obviously he's a British rapper, and British rap has usually before fallen into two categories, and the first one has always been, I suppose one would call it grime, but it's more just quite dull, repetitive, it all sounds the same, you know, it doesn't really have that sort of spark or edge to it that a lot of sort of less famous American rappers have. But at the same time, and then the second one, sorry, is the sort of more poppy stuff like Dizzy Rascal. But Scroobius Pip isn't in either of those. It's more sort of literate rap, which I think is interesting. So I'm really excited for that. Yeah, and then the final question is an anonymous question, which is, why are you video answering questions? And there seems to be an air in there of, how dare you be video answering questions? Who do you think you are? And frankly, I'm videoing answering questions because I am Jesus, and I wanted to make it clear that I am Jesus. And you should go out and do my work and do my word. No, I just felt like, you know, it was something different. It's something I've never done before. I'm always interested when people do sort of videos on Tumblr. I suppose, you know. Yeah, I'm sorry that I can't really give you a more satisfactory answer than, you know, because I feel like it, but that's the truth, so what can you do? But anyway, this is the finish of the second half and the entire thing. How long is this? 11 minutes, so even longer than the first one. Sorry about that, and I'm also very sorry that the poor lighting, I look quite ill, I think, because of the poor lighting. I look very grey and sort of like I'm disintegrating. But you know, if you've watched the whole thing, then kudos. Really, I'll send you a pancake or something. And yeah, ta very much.